There we go, we're on. Excellent. Thank you, Vicky, for that kind introduction, and to Arthur for this spectacular venue that we're very lucky to be at today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start with a very simple premise. Boating enriches people's lives. Simply being in, on, or around water changes your perception, reduces your stress, gives you a sense of calm, and creates an overall sense of well-being. We know it. We're in this industry. We understand that. But our reality is that we need to change people's perspective about our industry, that it is intrinsically good for people to get in, on, or around water. There's actually a lot of science associated with this. There was a fantastic book written about 10 years ago by Wallace J. Nichols, a marine biologist who worked with a neuroscientist to actually do the research to prove the effect that we know anecdotally. You know what it's like, you go out on your boat, you spend the weekend, you feel like you've been away for a week. But what is actually going on? And the reality in that is that when they did that study, they found some amazing results. And those results were that cortisol, the stress hormone, goes down. Serotonin, that one that gives that sense of calm, goes up. There are genuine physical and neurological changes that happen to human beings when they are in, on, or around water. But why is that important for us? It's important because we need to change the dialogue about our industry. We need governments to actually understand that our industry is important, that it actually does benefit communities, it does benefit people, and the infrastructure we build, like these wonderful marinas, that even bring people to them that may not even be going on the boat, even if they're next to the water in a restaurant and they're looking over the water, they get the same effect. And what's profound about that is it isn't just getting out into nature. There's a dramatic difference, dramatic difference between being in a blue space and being in a green space. You get a much more dramatic effect when you're actually in blue spaces. So as a consequence, we're actually responsible for being evangelists for this lifestyle, to take it to other people, to share this fantastic lifestyle with other people, to enrich their lives. So the question is, how do we do it? And the first thing is that we need to recognise that we are actually a significant industry. Globally, more than 300 people engage in some form of boating each year. Economically, our industry contributes over $300 billion to the world economy. These are not insignificant amounts of money. We're a significant tourism activator. If you look at a lot of imagery about tourism in coastal locations, there's always shots of boats, marinas, and activities that are associated with water. These are the areas where we make significant contribution. And so we need to recognise that we actually do have a voice, and we need to express that voice in the way that we communicate with people. The other aspect is we have to have a clear vision as to what our industry needs to be. What is our future vision of our success? And if we are going to change the perception of our industry, there are a number of things we need to do. We need to deliver high quality products and services. We need to recognise that consumer behaviour has changed, and sometimes people want different ways to engage. In acquisition of boats, they might want syndicates or clubs or other ways that are pathways in to being able to enjoy this lifestyle that isn't just buy a product, buy a boat, look after yourself, away you go. We need to provide a better outcome and services. And the other elements that are really important is that we need to have environmental credibility. We need to, given that governments rely on us, we need to have environmental credibility that we not only are not polluting, but at the same time that we're implementing practices of sustainability so that we have genuine credibility in that area. Likewise with boating safety, we need to create a culture of boating safety across our industry. Consequently, what happens is if we demonstrate that we've got a culture of boating safety, then we have education versus regulation. And that's what's really important. It's all about education versus regulation so that we take control of our destiny. We don't have other parties starting to write rules that prevent us from doing certain things. And absolutely core to our success will be the perception that we are a reliable and honest and have integrity in our relationships with government. We need to be a reliable partner to government that they can look to, that they know that if we are going to implement a project, that we implement it in the right way and that we've got frameworks. And ultimately, we need to be an aspirational industry that young people want to be in. They need to know about our industry and they need to aspire to come into our industry so that we do have the workers of the future that are able to deliver our success going forward. But it's not without its challenges. And probably the biggest challenge we collectively face is climate change. And what's interesting about climate change is it's already manifest today in its implications to our industry. The increased propensity for extreme weather events around the world drives an insurance market that makes it hard to get insurance at the land-water interface. And if you can't get right levels of insurance at the land-water interface, then you've got issues in relation to finance and things like that. That connection, that's not something that's going to happen in 10, 20 or 30 years' time. That's happening today. And so we need to recognise that in our approach to our infrastructure, we need to be climate change resilient, we need to be sustainable, and we need to approach it in a way that ensures that we're delivering, credible projects that actually achieve those sorts of outcomes. But the single interesting thing about the whole dialogue around climate change is it all comes down to carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases, the UN Paris Agreement, reduction 50% by 2030, 100% by 2050, and then they look at our industry and the perception of our industry, big white boats, using lots of fossil fuels, creating these challenges. The thing is, perception often has no bearing to reality. Firstly, 95% of the boating industry, of course, is small boats. The second thing, though, which is more relevant, is that our annual contribution to carbon emissions on a global basis is between 0.02 and 0.14% of total global emissions. So just those figures again, 0.02 to 0.14% of global emissions. Now, if you put that in context, transport's about 20%, power generation's about 40%. Now, I certainly don't raise that as a justification to say we don't need to do anything. The important issue here is that we won't determine what the fuel of the future is. We won't determine what the energy source of the future is. That will be determined in power generation and broader transport because we are a small component in that. And so we have to, in looking forward to the decarbonisation of the future, we need to very carefully watch what's going to happen because it impacts on us. What is the fuel going to be? Is it electrical? What infrastructure we need? Is it going to be hydrogen or other fuels of that nature, biofuels, etc.? But I think where it really comes down to a key issue is that we then need to look at the facts. What are the facts? And in this particular emotionally charged and politically charged topic, the facts often get lost. And so one of the things that we've done at Icomia over the last couple of years have invested hundreds of thousands of euros in a decarbonisation study with international consultants Ricardo to look at the facts. Those facts are the full life cycle analysis of embodied carbon within a whole range of different craft and a whole range of different propulsion systems so that we can be informed about the cradle to grave life cycle embodied carbon in all of those alternatives so that we can be informed. Now that study isn't finished yet. The results will be available around the middle of this year. But one of the things that comes out of it that's really interesting, and it's a simple analogy, and that is that if you look at the difference between the embodied energy in diesel per volume and the embodied energy in a lithium-ion battery by volume, there is 30 times the energy density in diesel fuel. Now, an electrical motor is about 300% more efficient in translating energy within a battery into forward propulsion than an internal combustion engine is in converting the embodied energy in a diesel fuel into forward propulsion. So in essence, what that really boils down to is that for the same performance and range, you would need 10 times the volume of diesel fuel stored on a vessel in batteries to get that same outcome. Now, interestingly enough, in a sort of 40-odd foot power craft or something like that, the fuel held on board is often about 10% of the displacement, so the physics just don't work. So that means that ultimately you end up with this scenario where you have to have a compromise on either range or performance. So one of the things that comes out of it, there is no single solution that actually solves the whole problem. Small craft, as an example, and say in the Scandinavians, for instance, might jump in their speedboat, they'll go up to their summer house, and they'll use their boat for a couple of hours going that way and a couple of hours going that way. You don't need 100 hours of battery storage to do that. And so you can design craft specifically to meet that sort of requirement. Jet skis again, PWCs, same thing. You can design them with batteries, small craft, to be able to do those things. But larger craft that need to have range ultimately will end up being some form of hybrid solution, some sort of, the fuel that will be powering that is yet to be determined. Will it be hydrogen? Will it be biofuels? Will it be all of these things? But we're going to have a whole range of different outcomes. And like I said, ultimately the infrastructure for the fuel will be determined by other people like transport systems, because that's the fuel that we'll end up using, because it'll be produced in enough volume to make it cost effective. And so there's a whole range of things that come around that we need to sort of work our way through. And that study itself, again, is about having the facts. But I think one of the really interesting ones is that when you look at the preliminary information from that study, there is an enormous amount of embodied carbon in the manufacturing process. There is a lot of carbon in the disposal process, but relatively speaking, there's not actually that much carbon in the operating process of vessels, particularly smaller ones, because the average utilisation of a vessel is about 50 hours a year. And so this raises the next thing. These facts will help us transition our industry, because the worst possible case scenario is a regulator says, no more internal combustion engines, we've got to get rid of those, we've got to do this tomorrow, which means that the embodied carbon in all of the vessels that we've got is lost. And there's enormous value in that. That's actually already on the balance sheet. That's spent. And so we need to basically have a transition, and that might be a combination of things. It might be, we might have a carbon offset program that's orientated towards the land-water interface in the ocean. It might be biofuels. It might be a whole range of different things. But we need to have sensible solutions that actually take us forward on that. Importantly, we need a strategy based on facts so that we can put that in front of people and we can demonstrate what we do. And I think this is just an example of saying, what does ICOMIA do? What is the International Council of Marine Industry Association? What's its role and what does it mean for this part of the world? Well, ICOMIA's primary role is collaboration. Our members, our 37 Marine Industry Association members represent 90% of the global turnover of our industry. We have sustaining members that are the leading companies around the world, and the whole purpose of the organisation is to enable those organisations to collaborate on issues like this. The second part is that we undertake projects like the Ricardo project to provide us the opportunity to be able to set strategies for the world going forward in our industry. And the third part, which is the least glamorous part of it, but we represent the industry in global forums. And a classic example of that, there's 147 odd ISO standards that impact on our industry, and we've got a seat at the table of all of them. And that's a challenging exercise, I have to say. And then, I guess at the end of the day, our core objective is to really support our industry in being able to get to that sustainable future that I talked about before, with safety and environment and relationships and reliability with government and things like that. So if we look fundamentally, what does all of that mean for Southeast Asia? And I think that there's some interesting phenomenon. 3 years ago, April 2020, most of us were locked down and had no idea what the future held. It was a very strange time. It's amazing we've lost the context of it, but around the world, very early, what's happening with this? We don't know. There was an uncertain future. As we moved through that, we saw this incredible take-up of boating activity. People realised nothing's more social distancing than getting out on a boat. You're outdoors. People reconnected with the love of boating because they got that sense of calm in what was, globally a time of great concern. The other thing is that they built habits. It wasn't a week or 2 weeks, it went on for years. And so we built these habits of people getting involved in boating. And so we saw around the world massive growth in the demand for boats and boating. Consequently, a lot of the markets became, focused on their domestic markets, manufacturing for their domestic markets. They weren't looking outwardly in the world and doing all of those sorts of things. And we saw an unprecedented demand for boats and boating around mature markets. Never been that high. But that's gone. The demand is starting to come off. The eyes are starting to open. The focus is starting to change. And globally, the future has to be to look to areas of markets that have got the potential for growth, that have got the potential to emerge. And so you then look to this part of the world. If you think about the things that are catalysts for growth of markets, first and foremost, destinations. Is it a good place to go boating? I don't have to tell you. We all know how amazing some of the destinations are here, some of the waterways here, some of the unspoilt areas that you can still get to. And the timing is extraordinary in the part that if you look at the way that even super yachts, top end of the industry, the change in approach to super yachts has been explorers, range, adventure. It's not about park it in the back of Monaco and sit on the back and have a drink. It's, I want to go to different parts of the world. I want to go to Antarctica. I want to go to Southeast Asia. I want to do these exciting adventure things. Life's too short. Life's too short. It's what comes from, having a global pandemic. And so consequently, you've got that huge opportunity of location that can be marketed. But what's the impediment? Your impediment is exactly the same as every impediment around the world. The only thing stopping the industry growing and booming is actually government regulation. And it's not that there's anything particularly where governments say, we don't like this industry, we want to stop it. It's just that we haven't achieved the focus. And so what we need to do is rechange the dialogue, and that's where we can help as Iconia in being able to frame up a whole range of different things, the lessons that we've learned around the world as to how we can change the perception of how our industry is good for the community, creates economic outcomes, and delivers, great results for the participants of the industry as well. And that is our core mission. It's being able to support you in being able to address those types of issues. Now, I know today a lot of the discussion will be around how you move between different countries and what the regulatory frameworks are and things like that. But the key to it is if we can get the start on a pathway to improved outcomes and regulation, it's about access to waterways. It's about the terms on which you can access government land in a viable way to enable investors to invest in infrastructure to be able to support the industry, because once we've got those issues resolved, then that's when we'll be able to draw the market in and the market has an opportunity to expand. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what everyone's got to say today and participating in those discussions. Thank you all for being here, to making the time to actually come together, because this is the foundation of our success. All of us coming together, collaborating, sharing our ideas and sharing our enthusiasm. But we just have to remember that at the end of the day, our single mission is to get more people boating, to grow participation in recreational boating, because boating does enrich people's lives. Thank you very much.